Hi, in this video we're going to look at how to graph a quadratic equation in standard form. Remember, standard form is an equation that looks like this: y equals a times x squared plus b times x plus c, where a, b, and c are real numbers, and a is not 0, so the first term is an x squared with a number in front of it, a. Okay, so let's look at the worksheet for lesson 20. At the top of the worksheet, we have two pictures. So the graph of a quadratic equation is always going to be a parabola, and it's either going to be opening upward, like the one on the left, or opening downward, like the one on the right. So there's always a vertex. The vertex, if it's opening upward, the vertex is the lowest point on the graph. But if it's opening downward, it's going to be the highest point on the graph. And also, there's always this invisible line called the axis of symmetry. This isn't part of the graph of the parabola, but it is sort of a helpful line that tells us about the symmetry of the parabola. That invisible line, that axis of symmetry, it acts like a mirror. So notice that the right half of the parabola is kind of a mirror image of the left half of the parabola. And this often helps us graph the parabola if we can find that line. And so since that line is a vertical line, and we know all vertical lines have an equation x equals some number, it's important to find that number. It's also important because we know the vertex will always be on that line, and so we'll have the x-coordinate of the vertex if we get the equation of that line. So for a quadratic equation in standard form, the equation of the axis of symmetry is always going to be x equals negative b over 2a. So in both cases, that's going to be the equation of the axis of symmetry of our parabola. So let's look at the first problem, part A of number 1. So in this problem it says graph the parabola y equals negative 2 times x squared. So this is in fact standard form. It can be written as y equals negative 2x squared plus 0x plus 0. So a is negative 2, b is 0, and c is 0. So it tells us to first graph the axis of symmetry, and then to plot the vertex, and then to get 4 more points, 2 on either side of the vertex. It's important that you do everything in this order. Start with the axis of symmetry, then the vertex. Otherwise, you'll be plugging in random points, and you'll often miss the actual shape of the parabola. So it's important that the vertex comes before the other points. All right, so the axis of symmetry, the first thing you want to do is write down the equation. So it's going to be x equals negative b over 2a. So b is 0 and a is negative 2, so let's plug those in. And so we get 0 over 4, which means we get x equals 0 as the equation of the axis of symmetry. So the vertical line x equals 0 is just the y-axis. So let's graph that. And now let's start filling in the table. The first thing we want to fill in is the vertex. So the x-coordinate of the vertex is 0, because the vertex has to sit on that line, x equals 0, and every point on that line has x-coordinate 0. So let's put in 0 for the x-coordinate of the vertex. And now let's find the y-coordinate. Well, we plug 0 in for x, and we get negative 2 times 0 squared. So that's 0 as well. So let's plot the vertex and label it. So we don't know if that's the lowest point or the highest point at this point. We're going to have to find a few other points. So we're going to choose x-coordinates on the left of 0 and x-coordinates on the right of 0. So let's choose negative 1 and negative 2 on the left. and then positive 1 and positive 2 on the right. And so now I'm going to plug in negative 1. I get negative 2 times negative 1 squared, which is negative 2 times positive 1. So the coordinates of that point are negative 2, comma, negative 1, comma, negative 2. So now if I plug in negative 2, I get negative 2 times negative 2 squared, so that's negative 2 times positive 4, which is negative 8. So that means the point is negative 2, comma, negative 8. And now let's plug in positive 1. We get negative 2 again. And then if we plug in positive 2, we get negative 8 again. So notice that the y-coordinates of the 2 points on the left, those were negative 2 and negative 8, are the same as the y-coordinates of the 2 points on the right, negative 2 and negative 8. And that's because of the symmetry. So let's see what they look like. Plotting all those points and labeling them. We can see the symmetry of those points. And now let's connect the dots with a nice smooth curve. They're not straight lines. Okay, so there's our parabola. It opens downward. The highest point is the vertex 0, 0. All right, let's look at the second problem, part B. I'm not going to complete the entire problem for you. I want you guys to finish this one, but I'll get you started. So this one says graph the parabola y equals x squared minus 5. And in standard form, that means a is 1, b is 0, and c is negative 5. So let's get the equation of the axis of symmetry. It's going to be x equals negative 0 over 2 times positive 1. That's negative b over 2a. And that's, again, x equals 0. That's the equation of the axis of symmetry. So it's that vertical line, x equals 0. And that also tells us that the x-coordinate of the vertex has to be 0. So when we fill in the table, we know the x-coordinate of the vertex is 0. And then we can choose 2 x-coordinates on the left and 2 x-coordinates on the right. So I'm going to use negative 1 and negative 2 again on the left, and positive 1 and positive 2 on the right. And then I'll leave it to you to fill in the rest of the table and sketch the graph. So you're going to compute all of those y-coordinates and then write down the ordered pairs of those 5 points. And then you'll plot those 5 points and then connect the dots with a nice smooth curve. And it'll be a parabola, either opening upward or opening downward. Okay, if it opens upward, the lowest point is the vertex. If it opens downward, the highest point is the vertex. All right, so make sure you fill in the rest of that problem and understand what it looks like and the whole process. But let's look at the third part of problem 1. This one says graph the function f of x equals negative x squared minus 2x plus 3. So it does say to graph the function, graph the axis of symmetry of the parabola. Well, that's a big clue that this is going to be a parabola, and it is a quadratic function. So we call it a function because it's written in function notation, f of x instead of y, but the shape of the graph is exactly the same. Okay, so we're going to do the same process. We're going to get the axis of symmetry, the vertex, and 2 points on either side of the vertex. So let's start with the axis of symmetry. The equation, again, is going to be x equals negative b over 2a. So let's plug in negative 2 for b and negative 1 for a. And simplify that. We get positive 2 in the top and negative 2 in the bottom. So the equation is x equals -1. So that vertical line looks like this. So it's not the y-axis this time, it's another vertical line. So then when we begin filling in the table, we always start with the vertex. The x-coordinate of the vertex is always going to be, so the point, the vertex is always going to sit on that vertical line that we just drew. So the x-coordinate of any point on that line, the x-coordinate has to be -1. So we know the x-coordinate of the vertex is -1. And so now I want to choose 2 points, 2 numbers on the left side of -1 and 2 points on the right side of -1. So on the left, I'm going to choose -2 and -3. On the right, I'm going to choose 0 and +1. So now I want you to put this video on pause. Put me on pause and start computing all of the y coordinates for those 5 points that I just gave you. So put me on pause. All right, welcome back. So let's see what we all got for our y coordinates. So plugging in -3 in the first one, -2 in the second one, -1 for the vertex, plugging in 0, plugging in +1. The points that we get are -3, 0, -2, +3, -1, 4, that's the vertex, 0, 3, and then 1, 0. So those are the 5 points we all got. And when we plot those points, so first plot the vertex, that's -1, 4. That's sitting on that vertical line. And then start plotting the other points. And then we connect everything with a nice smooth curve. So notice that this one was opening downward. So you should have noticed by now, after doing 3 problems, that your parabola will open upward when the number in front of the x² term is positive. So the parabola opens upward when a is positive or greater than 0. And the parabola opens downward when the number in front of the x² is negative or less than 0. So these are 2 things I hope you've noticed by now, and this will help you in future problems predict what your graph should look like. So you'll have a picture in your mind of what it'll look like, and so when you start plotting points, if it doesn't look like that, then perhaps you can find a mistake. Okay. That's the end of that video. There will be several more to help you get through lesson 20.